Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And today we've got a little bit of a long video, but if you stick around it will be good. And just the reason for this video is because I've got a new segment called Designer Highlight. And this is the part where I do kind of once in a while some like interviews and discussions with real life designers. Some jewellery designers, like maybe we'll see about having some product designers, but I'm mainly trying to focus on like jewellery designers for this wee bit because as you may know or may not know, my goal is to try and get people to think differently about design and have it more of a, I guess, more meaningful and less about the aesthetics and more about how we can use jewellery in a more functional and helpful way to better a person's like well-being or mental health, because it's important and it's also quite like personal as well. So if we can tackle that, then it helps at least. So today we are joined by Lorna Romanenghi, and she is a designer and she's based in Scotland, and she tells us about her experience on how jewellery can bring and provide a sense of immortality and to create like a narrative. And I wanted to interview her because her values are very like similar to me in the sense that jewellery does hold more of a sentimental value. It holds more of a narration, and it's more than just an aesthetic. And her views were very interesting when I was talking to her. So here's what she had to say about her views on jewellery and the meaningfulness and immortality it has and what it has to offer. Thanks for sort of like coming to do like this kind of like interview thing.
No problem at all. I was quite honoured to be asked.
Yeah, I think as I seen you post on your YouTube about the I guess how like jewellery is like kind of immortal, and I was like, oh, that's quite interesting, because I think that's like my goal is to try to get people to think differently about design and also jewellery, and not think of it being like just aesthetic. So maybe I can like start off and say like yes, like as you know, like kind of my jewellery sort of, or I like to design for someone's like well-being, and I believe that jewellery and also experiences has this like power to manage a person's like mental health, and I believe this is done through like functional purposes of jewellery, rather than the attention of being solely focused on aesthetics. And yeah, I feel that doing this kind of can maybe broaden someone's mind a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the power that jewellery has isn't just a question of wanting to look good. I mean, you just think of someone that, even if it's something that's not been designed with the intention of having that extra meaning or so on, if you're just looking at a basic piece of jewellery that was gifted at some point, the power that it then has to be cathartic, to be kind of close to someone's emotions and so on, is so strong that even if you just think of complete breakdowns and just from a small object, and it's kind of an amazing power that it holds. So that's just for something that's not been designed with that intention in mind. And if you, in my mind, if you design something with that extra intention, with that extra bit, that power just kind of gets enhanced, and the meaning and that kind of love for the object just gets enhanced, definitely.
For sure. And like with your own like jewelry, like what's your take on like the sort of power that it has maybe for your users?
Well, the way that I well, when I'm inspired to just create my own pieces, mine's very much to do with the world that surrounds us. So it's very much to do with nature and kind of looking beyond the kind of structure of man and going back to that kind of primitive side, because I find that a very kind of cathartic subject. Personally, if I'm having like a really bad day or whatever, I take myself out for a walk and even just sit in a a park or something and just look at nature.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that is my catharsis, and I kind of bring that into my designs, but I also like to kind of educate on the other side of things. So I like to look beyond just what I see,
Yeah.
and I get into just the kind of research bug, as it were, and I start looking at the sounds that it produces, or the way that it moves, or something that isn't obvious, but I'm trying to actually immortalize that creation, that beautiful thing, by not just saying, right, it looks like this. I'm like, yes, but how does it feel? How does it smell? How does it actually interact with the world around it? So that's what I find soothing.
Mm.
And that's kind of the inspiration for my work. And I feel that nature is something that is soothing on a kind of pan-global aspect. But another part of my business that I'm now hoping to focus more on is working more with a client.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously from the work that I'm doing, they can see my kind of style, my kind of take on it, and that I'll always try and go that step further to design something that really means something to them. But I want to do it in a way that is really personal to them.
Mm.
So really working closely with the client and what they want, and trying to really help them capture that. But I want to try and give them almost like more than they think they'll get out of it, in that sense of, for me, jewelry, as you were saying, like, it's kind of an immortal aspect, and just your love for something, or your love for that jewel, I feel that it should not be a story that's forgotten.
Mm.
So one thing that I've started doing is actually accompanying every piece of jewelry that I make with a posterity book.
Okay.
So it's a booklet that when someone buys it, or when someone buys it to gift, or whatever, you put in an entry of who you are, or who you're gifting it to, the date, and a story about why, that story that you want to capture. Because obviously buying a piece of jewelry is a big moment, especially when it's something that commemorative and so on. And I just have this thing of, I feel that story should not be forgotten.
Exactly.
So basically they enter it, and then it has the potential to become an heirloom, because there are further entries to then who gets the piece of jewelry afterwards, and entering their story and their attachment to it, and why that could be the case. So I'm trying to basically reinvent what an heirloom is, because for me, every piece of jewelry has the potential to be an heirloom, because it has that strong personal bond with someone. It defines your style, it defines your loves, it defines a moment in time, or a person, or something that you want to commemorate. And that kind of came from something that I always felt quite dearly when I was a kid. I always had this kind of memory box, and it just had loads of pieces of jewelry in it from like loads of relatives that had finally kind of come to this kind of little black box, and it was mine all of a sudden. And I just loved sitting there and just looking at each piece and imagining all the stories of where they'd been before me and who'd worn them. And like, most of the time, I have to say, like, it's from a child's fevered imagination. It was kind of Jane Austen style, like, oh, I'm down, I'm distressed, or something along those lines. But one thing that I felt was really missing was the actual certainty of knowing who had it before, and why they'd done this and why they'd done that. And I think that's what I'm trying to capture now in my work, and the way that I want to work with clients is kind of give them those tools to really immortalize their story and take it through generations. So say 4 or 5 generations from now, someone that never actually knew you knows you.
Yeah.
To attach to that story.
Yeah.
Kind of give it, like, hone the wonderful power of jewelry and just give it that extra little boost so that people aren't forgotten.
Nice.
That's basically my kind of aim with it.
That's great, because it's kind of like you're capturing someone's like personality as well. It's like, I guess, them in a jewelry form in a way.
Yeah, that's what I'm really hoping to. I mean, as I said, I love designing my big pieces, and kind of, because that is what it's almost like a personal brief that I'm setting myself, obviously, and it's kind of immortalizing my views to a certain aspect, and that sort of thing. And a lot of people can find similarities to approach and that sort, and that side of it. But when it's kind of working, wants something kind of specific, I love that feeling of they're getting exactly what they wanted, and they're getting what, like, something that is so close to them that they couldn't otherwise have. And that for me is the big thing. It doesn't matter what I'm designing, really. It's to do with trying to capture their personality, their memories, and their story. And I think that's the most beautiful part. I mean, I had this commission recently for this young guy, and I'm not allowed to say names or anything because he's not proposed yet, so I'm not gonna jinx it. But yeah, he commissioned me for an engagement ring, and it was just such an amazing process, because I just got him to talk about, not like, oh, I want a ring and I want it with this stone in this setting kind of thing. I just sat him down and I was like, right, okay, tell me about her. And he just spilled out, because initially he was like, oh, I want a ring, but I don't know what style, and I don't know what. And I was like, right, okay, I don't need to know about that for now. I need to know about what she likes. What do you think about when you think of her?
Yeah.
And he just spilled out his guts, and you could see the amount of love, the amount of just kind of passion that went with it. And instantly we came up with a design, and he's really happy with it. It's currently in the post and just like locked down in Heathrow, and I'm like, oh, come on.
Oh no.
Yeah, because New Zealand, he's from New Zealand, so it's all in lockdown at the moment, so I'm like, oh no, come on.
People must be on lockdown as well. Be like, I can't get it until I get through.
So we just keep tracking the parcel, and we're like, no, it's still in Heathrow. But hopefully it'll get there safe and sound. But yeah, but yeah, again, the experience itself, it was just absolutely amazing. And I think that experience especially is what turned me to, this is definitely what I want to be concentrating on. And yeah, then I'll have my forays into my big creations that will go on like Elements or down in London and stuff, and that's kind of my passion for making and that kind of thing. But I think the main focus of it, and the reason why I make, is to try and capture someone's personality, someone's stories, and try and make another human being happy.
That's really good, because it's I guess that's what's kind of like, in a way, about like the whole thing about how you can like personalize it, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's different for everyone, because I feel that if you just personalize something in one way, is, for someone it can be an engraved name or something, but for someone it can just be something that's much more abstract, something that only they know. And yeah, I think that's the challenge, and that's the challenge that I really like doing, of just picking up on their personality and what they really are like and what they would like, and trying to capture that in a way that is what they wanted.
I see. So like you said about you give them like little books. Like, what do you put in them? Like, what's...
So basically I give a few bits of documentation. So I kind of want it to be almost like a box that you can look at and so on. So for just kind of general small purchases from like my collections, or for like a small commission and so on, I as space for documentation for 4 generations. So even if it's planned or unplanned that a piece of jewelry gets passed down, it's something almost inevitable, because jewelry is kind of eternal. So even if you don't plan at that point to pass it down to anyone, you may get to a point in your life where you maybe have kids, or you have a nephew, or you have grandkids, or whatever, and that moment might present itself, and you want to make a momentous occasion of it. And it's just, I want to give them the option of kind of documenting who they are, why this piece is important to them, and then who they're gifting it to and why. And have that kind of thing of, it's not just the kind the bit of documentation of so and so owned this in so and so year. I want them to tell their story, so I give them space to kind of document who they are, why, when it was, why, and then just space to just tell their story and make it kind of a very intimate booklet. So that's one thing that I do. And then for my commissions, I do another little booklet that is specific for that commission. So for instance, for the engagement ring, it was something that really commemorated the design behind it and why it was made. So it became actually a very personal booklet about the couple, and every aspect of the ring that was kind of designed and why it relates back to the couple and so on. So I included like phrases of this man and how he described his hopefully soon to be fiance. And because they were such beautiful ways of just, for instance, I'd asked him like, how would you describe her in a few words, and he was like, she's a penguin. And I was like,
right.
I love that. I love that. That's going in. But it's just that way of capturing those moments and capturing not just a booklet that's like, well, this is a ring in 18 karat white gold and it has so and so settings.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to include that information as well, because it's useful to know for them in years to come if they need it cleaned or if they need it something like that. So it's practical information about this, that, and the other. But I want it to be personal, so it's mainly just about their story, their love, and their future story as well. And I think it's something that they can treasure almost as a little heirloom in itself, and then it can be passed down with the piece of jewelry so that people can remember, like, oh, do you remember Granny and Granddad? Like, this is how they felt about each other. And like, I want to immortalize them and be able to let them live on for future generations, because stories told from like father to son and mother to daughter, they're beautiful, but there's only a finite amount that it can kind of be told without being like the fish story, and things change and evolve, and then sometimes they just get lost. And I just hate for someone's life and someone's feelings to get lost. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, and try and give the tools so that it won't get lost, because it's there in writing and it can kind of be carried on with as an heirloom in itself. So those are the two different kind of things that I'm doing with basically any piece of jewelry that you'd get at least the posterity booklet. And just, it doesn't matter, because it can be like the smallest piece of jewelry, but to you it means much more than, doesn't matter what materials it's in. If it's got a tie to you and it could be something that becomes an heirloom, then why not document it and hope that it becomes an heirloom?
That's so beautiful, because then it's like, it's such a little like journal in a way.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm hoping to capture. But so far it's kind of a very recent development, and it kind of helped a little bit being in lockdown, I have to say, because I started the Vanilla Incubator program, and again I was thinking of like the business side of things, but as a usual maker I was just hiding behind my bench most of the time, going, no, I'll just keep making and I'll just keep making more stuff. But being in lockdown, and especially because I just moved in with my boyfriend to do the vanilla ink thing. Oh, yeah. But I have a workshop back home with my parents in Ayr. Yeah. But as soon as lockdown hit, I was here, so I have no working,
no bench.
Kind of major tools are back in Ayr where I've got my main workshop. And obviously Vanilla Ink is closed and you can't get to it because of isolation. So I was just literally faced with the situation of being a workaholic and being a makeaholic and not being able to get to a workshop. And honestly, like, it was tough. It was really tough, but I just started going, well, I've got all this time on my hands, I might as well actually focus on the business side of things and all the stuff that I'm scared to broach. So I just I started just questioning, like, why do I do what I do, and all these things, and back to when I kind of had that first relationship with jewelry, with those kind of jewels in a box kind of thing, and I was like, that's why I started all this. That's why I started making, and that's why I love jewelry. And I want to get back to that, and I want to be closer to that, and it's something that I'm passionate about. I'm always going to be passionate about, because I've always been passionate about. So yeah, as I said, it's very recent, and I've not really properly managed to test it out, because being kind of, as I said, on lockdown and so on, people are watching a lot what they're spending and so on. So obviously jewelry is not really a primary item. It's not really a necessity. So my sales have just kind of been zero, and obviously not being able to take commissions, you're just like, I'm sorry, I've not got any. So I'm hoping that it will take off, and I'm hoping feedback on it as well to see, because at the moment the booklet has got like up to 4 generations, but I kind of want to see what people kind of respond to, and if they say, actually I'd really like a booklet that's like 8 or 12 generations, something that's really, really longer, or someone that's going, oh well, actually maybe just like a couple would do. So I'm just waiting on a bit of feedback on that, and I'm actually just really excited to get back to normal and get back to kind of making and just making it, because with each commission that I have, like I'll have an entire couple of weeks of making that kind of unique booklet for that commission and for them, and I just really want to get started with it, kind of thing. And it's just, I'm really excited to get started. I'm like, I just don't have the tools to jump in.
It's so frustrating, because you just, I get the feeling.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm definitely works, and that people like it, and that I can make a go of it. So
yeah, no, it's a concept that I've not like heard of so far, so it's really like good, and it's very like touching, I think, to hear.
Thank you.
So I guess, like, so do you think it's possible that jewelry can have like this kind of narrative that bring people together, as you say? Like,
definitely. I mean, anyone that I've spoken to that kind of, you start a conversation like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a jeweler. They always tell you about their favorite piece of jewelry and why, and it's almost like a natural instinct and a natural response. And I just love it. I love hearing all these stories, and I was like, oh, this piece, like, and I think people a lot of the time, they kind of diss some of their jewelry if it's something that's not, it's something that's like smaller or kind of less precious materials and stuff, and they're like, oh, but it's only this. I'm like, there's no it's only about it, because it's not to do with the material, it's not to do with the value, like the intrinsic value of it, it's to do with the emotional value. And you can have someone that, I mean, it could be even just like one of those plastic rings from a cereal box, but if it's important to you because of that specific moment, then there's nothing to lessen that piece. But I love hearing people's stories about it and how it's important, and most of the time it is from a human connection and a narrative that's passed down. So it's kind of, my mother gave me this, or my father left me get this, or this is something that my sister gave me after a huge fight and we promised we'd never fight again, like, you know, that sort of thing. And it's something that sometimes reminds you, so a concept or a value that you really, really hold dear, and it kind of gives you that power or that security. Or, I mean, I remember as a kid, I had this necklace that I was never seen without. Like, there are people that know me from back in Italy where I grew up, that they still remember me as the girl with the crystal. And I just had this little crystal on a necklace, and it was something that my mum gave me when I was 5 years old. And it was the first time, because I was raised by a single mum, and we were never apart. She was a musician. I was always like touring with her, and I was always traveling with her. But for this tour for this job that she went on, I couldn't go with her. So this was the first time that I would have not been with her. So she gave me this piece of jewelry that she had that was given to her by a friend, and like there's a whole narrative before that, but for me it started at this point. And she gave it to me, telling me that this crystal had magic properties, and that if I got scared and if I got lonely and if I missed her, all I needed to do was to grab the crystal and rub it and talk into it, and she could hear me. Now, I know that's a whole load of baloney, and years later when I grew up, I knew that wasn't true. And yet I still had the instinct of when I felt troubled or when I felt alone, I would just take it and just rub it and just kind of, and it would soothe me.
Interesting.
And it was something that for me was very powerful. And that's kind of, and unfortunately, through a kind of bullying incident of getting a football in the face, that necklace broke.
Oh.
Yeah, and I was devastated because it was just like, it was so important to me. But also because like by this time I was must have been about 13 or 14 when this happened. But like as a kid, I always wanted to have like a family, and I always wanted to have children. And I just had this in my mind that when I had children and when I had a kid that got to that point in their life where some momentous occasion, I would pass that necklace down and tell the exact same story. And I felt like the person that broke it just like took not just like a piece of jewelry away from me, they took like that whole story away from me. So hopefully I can replace the jewelry and carry on the story, but it doesn't quite feel the same. Like
yeah, you're kind of like replacing the memory in a way.
Yeah, but yeah, I think there is a huge strength in the narrative. I think this is definitely something that shouldn't be undervalued, and it's definitely something that should be honored and embraced. And I think a lot of the time people just associate jewelry with something frivolous and something that is just to do with like looking pretty or showing off how much money you have or whatever. And I personally believe that's not the case, and it's never been the case. I did a talk in one of my videos about kind of it was the one about the immortality of jewelry, because it's always had that value of the narrative, even back to kind of prehistoric times. And even like if you look at, for instance, the old Navajo tribes, a lot of their jewelry, you see it as kind of, well, it's like fur, it's teeth, it's all this kind of thing. It's obviously for like bragging purposes and just to commemorate the animal that they had killed, and actually honor it and honor the sacrifice that it had made. And it was not a bragging thing, it was more of a, I've taken something away and I should remember that I shouldn't take that lightly. So there's always that narrative that's kind of taken down from the very start, and somewhere in the middle I feel that got undervalued and that got lost, and it just kind of became about material goods. But no matter what point in history you go, and no matter the main reason behind a piece of jewelry, you will always find that there is a narrative somewhere, there is a meaning somewhere. It's just sometimes hidden.
That's true. It's only when you sort of maybe put an attention towards it, I think the story starts to begin.
Yeah. I mean, you even just look at the artifacts that you find nowadays, and the historians are using them. If it had no narrative and if it had no meaning behind it, then it would kind of just be a worthless object. Just classify of, well, so and so, this thing probably dates to this time, and that's it. But it actually tells us a lot more. It tells us the kind of personality of the person that was behind it. It tells us, I mean, a lot of the time you hear these things of, oh, Napoleon gifted this to his wife and all this because she loved this, or because he wanted to commemorate that. And even just that, because we only know it because of that piece of jewelry. and there is a narrative, and most of the time these narratives we can only guess at, because it is something very personal and they haven't been documented, they haven't been kind of stored anywhere, so we can only guess, but there is something behind there.
That's true. So I feel like, you know, because I've seen your work from beginning, kind of middle and end, like, because we both went to like the same like uni together, and I've seen you grow. What's kind of like made you sort of decide to do the sort of like immortality kind of theme from?
I think it's just from personal values, because I realized that was the reason why I got into jewelry in the first place. So for me, there's a part of it as well that's it's kind of a very personal aspect of, I don't deal with mortality well. I've had to try more times than I am happy to, and I've never coped with it well. And for me, it's that kind of thing of, I want to try and capture some sort of immortality. I mean, everyone to an extent wants to have that immortal aspect. Obviously, immortality is not a thing. You can't, no matter where you look, no matter how you chase it, you're not gonna find it as such. But there are different immortalities out there. And for me, there was something of this that kind of, it's jewelry in itself is beyond just an object, and it has this power that kind of gives me a feeling of tranquility. And it gives me a feeling of, this is the closest that I can get to that kind of immortal point. And a lot of the time it's not to do with my immortality as such, but it's the immortality of other people, and just making sure that they're not forgotten and that they're still with us when they're not, as it were. So yeah, that's my main driving force. And it all started from just actually really questioning myself and questioning why I started jewelry, because obviously as a maker you get just kind of swept away by all the kind of making sides of things, and I absolutely love that. I love kind of looking at innovative materials and new designs and all this kind of thing, but the real reason why I started this was to pursue this kind of course, and this is why I love jewelry. So I feel that I need to go back to my roots and actually embrace it, and yes, apply everything else that I've learned and still will learn in years to come to this, and become the best maker that I possibly can. But the reason why I make and how I make is definitely from that.
Nice, because I feel like everyone can relate to, you know, you're kind of like making to a point, and then you're like, what? Why am I doing this? And at one point as well, I think I kind of like did a wee kind of plan, and like kind of like, why are you doing jewelry? And I was like, all right, yeah, I know why. You kind of did, yeah, straight from your initial goal.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's, as you said, you kind of get swept off, and especially at uni, I mean, it's a great place because you learn a lot of stuff, you kind of go out of your comfort zone on a lot of different things, but it is very much about the what rather than the why.
Yeah.
So you're doing these things, and you've got these briefs that you're setting yourself, and it's just like, oh, I'm going to do a brief about, I don't know, the DNA or something like that, and they're all really fascinating and really interesting, and sometimes it's just to do with the material, the process itself, or like even using 3D printing, and you get really engrossed in this. But it's almost like you've got the house but you don't have the foundations.
Sure.
So it's gonna be great, but at some point it's gonna collapse in on itself, because you're not using that driving force that's pushing you to make. And if you just make stuff that's, yeah, aesthetically interesting, you can only go so far, because at the end of the day, you're not just selling a Pandora necklace that's doing it for kind of fashion or whatever. Like, you're selling something unique, you're offering something unique. And if you don't put yourself into that, then you're not really you're not really engaging with the people that might want to buy your stuff at the end of the day. So yeah, I feel that it's like, yeah, you always come out of uni going, right, I can make this and I do this, but why?
Yeah, exactly.
And you kind of go through that point where you're just questioning absolutely everything, and your usual kind of way of doing it is always questioning what you make, and you're like, oh, maybe the collection has gone stale, or maybe I need to rethink this, or maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And a lot of the time, yeah, you need to stay fresh and you need to like question that all, but that isn't the main thing that you should be questioning from a starting point. It's always to do with the why do you make, why do you want to do jewelry? Like, this is, it's more than just a job, this is a vocation. And why did you get sucked into it? Like, why are you doing it? And it's a tough question, and it took me like a good few weeks to actually like answer it. And I was like, I don't know why do I make, I like it. But it's a tough question to ask, and it sounds like a stupid thing to say, that like you don't know why you do it, but you get so sucked up with everything else that you forget, and you just need to give yourself time to actually remember why you did it in the first place.
Exactly. And when you tell people, there's more meaning behind it as well, like your pieces.
Absolutely. Instead of doing what is usually done at even degree shows and going, oh, what's your work about? Well, it's about this. And you're like, you're talking about the topic, but you're not talking about the why. You're not talking about yourself. There's a detachment between you, the maker, the topic, and the creations, and there should always be the underlying why to each part, because then, apart from the fact that you're more passionate about it, you're more passionate about talking about it, you won't get bored after a while going, oh, if I have to say this thing one more time. But it is because you've got a clarity of why you do what you do. And I think that, yes, I mean, if you're any kind of creative, you're always going to be questioning yourself. You're always going to be questioning if your work's good enough, if it's like innovative enough, if it's this enough, or if it's that enough. But I think that this kind of driving force gives you that bit more confidence and security in knowing that at least why you're doing it is right. And then everything else, you can get better at this, or you can learn this, or you can do that, but at least you're not questioning your foundations. And I feel that a lot of the time is what makes a lot of people fold, is because they maybe haven't given themselves time to actually question why they did it in the first place and have that grounding. And then the doubts just get too much, and the questioning just gets too much. And unfortunately, you get a lot of very talented makers that in the kind of first year or couple of years, they fold and they just do something else because they're not getting maybe the response that they wanted. They're not getting the kind of clients. And yeah, it's a long haul and it's a gamble. You're self-employed. You're doing this by yourself. It's not easy in today's market, or in any market. So it is tough, but when you've got those nagging doubts, even at the foundations of what you're doing, and you're constantly questioning it, then it's very difficult to come through it. But if you can actually question yourself and go, why am I doing this? At least you've got that driving force of going, okay, well, maybe this collection isn't working, or maybe this kind of work isn't working and I should be looking at this. But at least you've got the foundations to rebuild instead of nothing to rebuild on, if that makes sense.
Exactly. I feel like sometimes if you're passionate about it enough, that you could try and make it work, and if there's something that's maybe not working in that maybe particular collection, you could tweak it in such a way that can be helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
So like, I was just gonna ask about the kind of, there's a form over function kind of battle apparently going on. So do you think in like the jewellery industry, like or where it's headed, do you think it's going to stay like the same in like sort of the aesthetic sense, or do you think people's views are changing or will change, than seeing jewellery as more of a is more to being just nice, and think it could be like in a functional kind of value?
To be honest, I think I'm quite optimistic in this sense, and I think I'm speaking more out of hope than anything. But at the same time, I'm quite optimistic of it, because I think it is changing. I think the view of what it is very much changing. People are wanting something that has meaning, because if you look at the way that society's going, the way that the economy's going as well, from maybe like the 70s and 80s, where you had the kind of materialistic boom, that's when really kind of jewelry just became to show. Everyone had more money, everyone had a bit more to spend. You started getting much newer alloys in, so it made jewelry a lot more affordable, which are all good things in themselves. But unfortunately, it came in the kind of materialistic boom and mass production and all this. So it just became, there was a loss of care and a loss of understanding and a loss of meaning, because it was just an accessory. Jewelry was just classed as one of the accessories, like you had a belt, you had jewelry, you had, and it was just to complete an outfit. While I think now people are stepping back from that 80s materialistic sense and kind of scaling down what they have, and maybe having fewer, better quality, let's say, things, rather than many lesser quality things. So I'm hoping anyway that people are going back to the roots a bit of having something because it means something. I think as well, with the dawning of social media and dawning of more people talking about themselves and talking about kind of and sharing their stories with the world, jewelry gives that kind of perfect opportunity as a starting point. I mean, jewelry was always the kind of, even when it was used in a kind of bragging sense of showing something off because of the background, because of the stories. So it's like, oh, I have this, and this is what it means, and this is that, and it was always a talking point. But I think now it could, I mean, yeah, it could stay the same, but I am really hoping that the way that things are going, that it will change, and people will start getting more involved in the creation of it. I think that a lot of people as well have got to this point where they're fed up of mass production, because it's been around for ages, and it was great when it first started because everyone could have the same thing and it was much more affordable. But now, as kind of is the human condition, no one wants to be a carbon copy. Everyone wants to be and is unique. And so what they own, they want and should have something that reflects that. There are no two people that are alike, so why should two items be alike? Because it does show your personality, it shows your taste, it shows a lot of you. And so I think that people are more and more wanting that something that's unique, that you can't find anywhere else. And that's hopefully where it will go, because it will be a good change as well for small businesses and for kind of new designer makers and that sort of thing, because it has been a struggle in the industry for anyone that is self-employed, because you're constantly being undercut by big factories in China. And I think there's also an ethical part here that I maybe forgot to address, that in all these mass production items that you had back in the day, and that they're still going, because mass production is still very, very strong, but there is a lot of slave labor and a lot of kind of not very ethical behavior happening when you've got mass production. And back in the day, it was just either accepted or not really known about, and just these things happened and so on. But now there's a bit more clarity with it. There's a bit more openness with it. People know that it's happening, and bigger industries are starting to make their changes. But there's still a lot of bad things happening. And I think that people are getting more and more attuned to this. And they're starting to turn more to either industries that don't use this, and they're more environmentally friendly or eco-friendly or human-friendly, and starting to turn back to small businesses, because they have that kind of traceability. They know that they have gone to that one person and they can trace everything back to that one person. Nothing's been harmed, like no chemicals maybe have been used if you go to like an eco-friendly jeweler and stuff. And I think that's maybe an aspect that will drive it a lot, because people are getting more and more aware about the environment and about environmental causes. So that might be another aspect that will push us closer to this kind of smaller makers and actually helping to go back to that original link with jewelry, and not just having something that is an accessory, but having something that really, really means something.
For sure.
So I don't know if that's just pure optimism, but I'm hoping that's the direction it's going in.
I know, no, I'm the same. Like I can only like just be hopeful about this as well. Like I just I do wish that it does, but I guess we'll see. You know, like we're in 2020, we'll see. This is giving people time to reflect in their own homes. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even what you're doing now and what I'm hoping to do with some of my videos as well is just kind of get people to think, and just actually, this is the time where people have time. They can't go out, they can't do anything. They're getting closer and closer to their technology and their machines, which for me is a downside, because I do not like tech. I'm not tech savvy. I'm just like, no, please just give me something tangible to make. But it does have its upsides, that people are investing more time in bettering themselves, educating themselves more, learning, and even just time on videos and this sort of thing. So if there is content out there that actually helps people and makes them just think a little bit, and I feel that this might actually help define the course of kind of, not maybe global thinking, but hopefully getting there, and just having people starting to question the world around them. And this is just almost like a global thinking time. It's just like, right, you're always busy going out and doing all these things and being at work and having so many worries about, and yeah, it's still a worrying time, but this is the time to think, this is the time to reflect, this is the time to step back from everything that you thought you knew and everything that you had for certain in your usual routine, and just embrace the fact that you've got time to actually to question these things, and just look at a different way of thinking and educating yourself a bit more to industries that maybe you knew nothing about, and you're just maybe always a bit curious about. So yeah, I definitely think that your blogs and your videos are definitely gonna help do this, and help people question what they maybe have overlooked in the past.
Exactly. I mean, it's just like the littlest things, like, you know, like if one person at least could just like change their minds and just watch, like, you know, our videos and just be like, oh, you know, I never looked at that before, and yeah, it's slowly, bit by bit, it grows.
Absolutely. I mean, change always happens one person at a time, and it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but if, as you said, if even just one person just slightly changes their mindset, or just questions it slightly, then that one person could become 2, could become 4, could become 8, and then suddenly you've got people that are just thinking about things a bit more, and considering things in a new light. And that's our starting point.
No, it's true, but no, you've got your head way screwed on. It's like
Let me
but no, it's nice speaking to you, and it's good to see your grow and your process, and it's I have to say, like, from talking to you, I've been really inspired.
Thank you. Well, that's kind of my aim at the moment, is to try and inspire people that are even at home. They've got kids that they're needing to homeschool, and that's very, very difficult. That's very, very hard, but people are doing it astoundingly well. And they're looking at different ways of doing it and actually educating them in different subjects, different matters. And if I can, I mean, even with the videos that I'm doing and the videos that you're doing, even if someone like that were to watch a video and actually share it with their kids, I mean, it's all stuff that I believe that is good to get a young mind thinking about as well. And even if it's just sharing some content and like how to design a piece of jewelry and how these are the processes, then you can even start from a younger age of going, right, we're going to do a project today and we're going to design something and just give it a go and that sort of thing. And I feel that once someone has tried it and once someone understands also all the back work that goes to creating, I mean, you're the first to know, like, you've got years of like just designing and drawing and figuring out what to do, and just kind of sharing that with people. I think it's very much knowledge is power. If you understand what's going on behind, you appreciate it a lot more and you can understand it a lot more and you can love it a lot more. So yeah, I think just kind of giving people that kind of tool to allowing them into our little world and going, no, it's fine, it's not scary, come in, we'll show you what we do. And I think it's going to be a good thing, and if nothing else, people might just find it interesting, and even that could change your mindset.
So thanks guys for watching, and hopefully you guys stuck till the end, and I really do hope that you have, because you know we are, I'll just reiterate this, our goal is to sort of like get people to change thinking about what design is, and the whole conversation was just like really fascinating. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to me, subscribe to Lorna's channel as well. I'll have like social media links at the bottom, and hopefully you guys are all safe. You know, we're all getting through this quarantine, and you know, it seems that we're all kind of doing, you know, very well. So hopefully you guys so stay safe, but also try to be creative, you know, get outside the house, you know, maybe pick up a sketch pad or a piece of paper and just start creating, you know, this is the time to do it, it's your time. Design and reimagine and be creative. Right, okay, see you guys.